Hey folks, David Stewart here, coming at you with the wide angle lens. I'm in a big circle. Sorry for the delay. I was talking to myself for about 15 minutes. So I apologize. That's my fault. I was using Restream for a stream earlier this week, and I was planning on using it for future streams, and I sat down to do this because my wife just left the office from her work. And so I started streaming with Restream, and I was like, wait, I'm not set up to do this yet. I haven't done the things to get this stream going on every single platform. I was just kind of experimenting with music streams. So I stopped, I reset everything. There's a 10-second stream somewhere else that I'll have to delete off all my channels later. And then I was like, okay, boom, we're going, right? And then I'm just talking and I'm talking. I'm like, man, this chat is just dead. What is with this dead chat? Everybody, usually people are chatting up, they're talking and talking, they're talking crap. They're, saying racist jokes or whatever. My audience is great, but I was just talking into the void, and then I realized, oh, I didn't hit the go live button, which I always know how to do every week. So I just got thrown for a loop trying to do the restream thing and not setting OBS back to where it normally goes. So I apologize for the delay. That is completely my fault. You have a boomer brain fart technology moment where things changed. Oh, I don't know what to do. Okay, so anyway, we'll be getting things going on multiple platforms for this stream next week. I just haven't had a lot of time to get everything practiced so that it's it'll go on Twitter and Facebook and this channel and maybe another platform, Twitch or something, right? So it'll go live on every channel. It's not like I have a Twitter audience. I don't really have a Facebook audience, but it might be cool if my Facebook friends know that I write books, because I think most of them are clueless as to what I do. I don't really talk about it. Hey, you guys don't really care. You'll be like, Dave can't be a great author because I don't know any great authors. That's kind of the logic that people end up following with this kind of stuff. So just one of those funny things I notice, I can't believe this little clip thing is actually holding the camera down. I'm perplexed that it actually is working today. I was like, oh, I gotta throw something together real quick. Okay. And we're doing the wide angle lens because I actually can't, unless I shut everything down, I can't put it back on the normal focal length. I like the wide angle because I put it up here, and then you can see me playing guitar and playing with all my equipment. And looks like prog rock, cool, or whatever. But anyway, so here's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, we are going to be talking about the writing process, and there's two big areas that I'm going to talk about with that. The fact is that most people, when they start trying to think about how to write a book, they start reading writing manuals that will just really sink them. And that's because the writing manuals are mostly bullshit and don't tell you what you need to know on a practical level to complete a book. And so that's why I wrote Keys to Prolific Creativity, is I noticed that the big shortfall was not in knowing what a protagonist is or knowing what a plot is, right? I talk about that stuff, and it's good to know, and it's part of the intro for this series of live streams I'm going to do. I'm going to have a whole cycle that should go through June that'll cover hopefully every single topic I can think about when it comes to writing books. But I wrote this because the problem was that people aren't finishing their first draft, right? They can't finish their first draft. So if you can't finish your first draft, you're sunk, right? And the reason they can't finish their first draft is not because they don't know what a protagonist is. It's kind of that they don't know how to outline. It's more that they think that they're not supposed to outline, and it's supposed to be this magical, writing is this magical experience where you sit down and you feel inspired and the words just kind of they just flow out of you. And the truth is that feeling happens from practicing writing in a way where you're not doing that. Where if I sit down and it's the middle of the night and I put on, I'm listening to myself, by the way, this is my music, I put this on put on some rain music. I'm going to link this video, actually. I think it's on my my No Talkie Talkie channel, which you can buy this, by the way. Hold on. There it is. All right. So I'm going to link this in the chat. If you want a really long form piece, I did a 50-minute long piece on my other channel. This is it. It's called Rain. It's got some rain sounds, got some footage of rain at my house. Pretty cool. You know, I'll put on something like that, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling it. I love what my characters are saying. I feel like I'm saying important things. I feel invigorated. But I'm able to do that mostly because I practiced writing to the point where, like, I can sit down and I know what I'm going to write. When the page opens up, I know what's going to go on the page. And I also know how much I need to do, and I've also set aside time to do it. So the two big areas that I'm going to talk about today are, first of all, the practical part. How do you arrange your life and your priorities so that you can actually get the work done? That's the main thing I talk about in this book. How to design your creative process so that it works in your life amongst all the many obligations you have. The reality is, like, a modern life is like a basket, and it's too full of stuff. Stuff is falling out of it. We're trying to stuff in more things than is really appropriate. And you have to prioritize what is always going to be in the basket and what's going to be in the basket, you know, when you're able to put it in the basket. And I'll give you an example from my life. So, you know, there are things that I prioritize that are always in the basket, like my children. If I'm always taking care of my children, I don't ignore them, right? I am always educating them, right? I'm never missing their lessons. Even today, we had kind of an off day because it was like I was up all night, the baby's up at 5 a.m. Anyway, I'm like, okay, we're still got to bang out a couple good lessons. We're going to do Spanish and stuff, right? And, you know, normally we spend longer, but, you know, I always get that done. I always feed them nutritious food. That's really important to me, like nutritious food for my kids, so that my kids are healthy, that they feel good, that they're not going to be obese or anything like that, because I feed them nutritious food that nourishes their bodies. That's really important to me. So that's a thing that's always in my basket. Certain things fall out of my basket, and I put them in there when I'm able to. And one of those is like a clean kitchen. We had a really clean kitchen last week. I was like, this feels great. It's a total mess. We had a garage sale, like we had a busy weekend, then it's a messy kitchen. And I have to do like 4 loads of dishes to get rid of the dishes. Like we have, you know, we cook every meal at home. This is a thing that, just as an aside, you hear about, oh, it's so good to cook all your meals at home. It's like, you better be prepared to do dishes, because when you cook every meal at home, the dishes pile up. People that are like, I don't see why dishes are a big deal. It's like, you don't have children probably, and you probably like work out of the home and eat like 2 meals a day away from your house. That's if you're like a homebody. Like the people I know who, you know, you go to work, you eat breakfast in your car, maybe you have lunch at the office, you come home, then maybe you fix yourself dinner at home, but maybe you're going out, right? Especially if you're single. Yeah, dishes are no big deal because you have like 10 dishes a week you have to clean. Right here, it's like there's 10 dishes every hour that my family generates from all the food they're eating. It's like, okay, we ate this. Okay, and we're eating fruit. Now we're eating that, you know, like it's overwhelming. So I don't have a clean kitchen. My house is messy. I have toys on the floor over here. I got toys out behind this door. There's controllers not put back on the charging cradle, right, for the TV when we were playing Mario or something. You know, there's the Legos are spilling out everywhere in different places. We haven't put the Legos away, right? When I can clean those up, I do. But my priority is my children. And then after that, my priority is, you know, making sure my wife is okay and that her work environment is set up so that she can work, and making sure that I get my work done every day. So my children are like my number one priority. And then like the we're working thing is there. And my work is less important than my wife's work because she's the one who makes most of the money. So Obviously, we should prioritize the person who's got the money-making business, the more valuable business, which is my wife's business. And then, another thing is like exercise, right? How do I prioritize exercise? Health is really important, right? I try to eat good food. I prioritize eating good food. But I can't like spend 3 hours a day at the gym. I don't have that in me anymore. Like I would love to do it, but I don't have that extra time. So I have to think about what I'm putting in the basket. And it's like, you do your cardio, you do some weights a couple times a week, and that's it, right? I know people that it's like their thing is a cleanly house. That matters so much to them. And their house is spick and span all the time. And they're like, I don't know how you have time to write books. I'm like, well, I have a messy house. And yeah, it's like, how do you deal with this messy house? I don't know, but I wrote like 20 books. So, and, come out with albums and things and performed and done all the things that I've done. Right. So yes, the cleanly house is not really my priority. And I don't really need to feel bad about that because the people who have the cleanly house are envious of the other things that I've accomplished in my life. That's all, right? So you have to decide where I'm not saying that you shouldn't clean your room or something, right? So this is one of those things about like, clean your room. It's like, depends why you're cleaning your room. If you're cleaning your room to like have some mastery over your life where you have mastery over nothing, like the Jordan Peterson clean your room thing, that's great. If you're cleaning your room because because Jordan Peterson said you ought to, and you're doing that instead of doing other things, you should have a messy room. I don't make my bed. Why should I make my bed? I'm just going to fall into it when I'm exhausted at the end of the day and put the blankets back on me and go to sleep. Now my wife would love it if I made the bed every day, and she's actually said that. When you get up, you should make the bed. It feels so good. I'm like, why does it feel good? You only see it right before you go to sleep, and I never see it. I never see a made bed. I don't care about that, right? I love my wife and I will do things for her, but keeping that orderliness is not important. What matters is that my life is ordered to what I want to do, which is going to be, writing books. That's what I want my life ordered to. So the first thing that needs to happen is you got to get your priorities in line to figure out how to have time to work on your creative process. Now, once you get that, then we'll talk about the other half of that. Hopefully I hinted at the beginning of this that there's two halves of this. The actual technical part of writing a book. How do you technically write a book? So I'll get to that a little bit later. So I'll talk about 9 keys. One of the other reasons that I don't like writing manuals and why I still haven't come out with one, even though I've done a lot of work on one, but I'm hesitant to come out with it because it doesn't have a lot of new stuff in it. But a lot of writing manuals are very prescriptive. You have to do it this way. You need to do it this way. And that is fine. That's a great starting place. I have some like pink ink on here. It's very nice. I've had a little girl. But that actually won't help you finish the book. Having a Mad Libs, people that are new to this, they love having a Mad Libs fill in the blank kind of approach to writing. Like, tell me exactly what to do to make my book good. It's like, sorry, it actually won't work that way, because if you do the save the cat method, you'll end up with a Blake Snyder movie, which is going to be awful and predictable. You have to take risks. That's why I have the number 9 one as break the rules. So when I talk about lots of technical things, when I talk about anything, it's adapt it to you and take risks, break the rules. You do not have to have a protagonist in your story, believe it or not. You don't. You're like, oh, I need to have a single protagonist because Blake Snyder said I needed that. Okay. Dostoevsky doesn't. So, like, who's the protagonist of the Brothers Karamazov? Or are there many characters protagging? Right, as an example. So you will box yourself in a way that will stop you from doing what you really want and like accomplishing your goals and your dreams if you are too focused on Mad Lib style, fill in the blank, this is how you're supposed to write. Okay. So, first thing, I'll just go through the keys because they're really good. You can get this like free if you're on my Patreon, by the way. So the first one is align your priorities for creative output. That's basically what I just talked about. You have to decide what are the things in your life that matter more than writing your book and really should matter less. And you have to stick to those priorities. One of the things that, one of the ways that you can procrastinate is productive procrastination. What's productive procrastination? That is where you do one thing instead of another in order to avoid doing the difficult thing you know you ought to do. Let's say you have to write a term paper. You don't want to write it. So what do? You go do the dishes. You do another thing that you ought to be doing, right? Like the dishes. And you feel good for a minute, like, I did some work. I did something important. Did you? You didn't do what you were supposed to do, though. So productive procrastination is a thing that a lot of people will do. I have a nice, cleanly home, but I can't find time to write. Yeah, you can. I mean, J.K. Rowling actually said this. Like, how did I write all these books as a single mom? It's like the dishes were always, like the sink was always full of dishes. The house was always a mess, right? She just did not prioritize that domestic side of her life at all and prioritized getting the product out and taking care of her child. Hey, kudos. More people need to have a realistic approach like that. You can't do everything. I have to golf on Sundays. Okay, then you don't need to write a book. Okay. Oh, I can't just, like, I need to come home and I need to watch TV for an hour. You don't need to write a book. It's okay to be like, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to write a symphony. It's okay to have that, believe it or not. Not everybody has this like force inside of them that they have to unleash like vomit or they'll die, which is me, right? But not everyone has that burning inside of them where they have to vomit up creative output or they'll, fall into such a deep depression that they might as well not be alive. Most people, it's just like, I wish I could. You actually can. And so from there, it's like, you just need to decide how much you're really willing to work on it. The best thing to do is to work every day. Even if it's 30 minutes, even if it's 15 minutes, work every day. Set aside a time that's for you. Put away your phone, put your obligations to the side, and just focus on doing your creative work. Just focus on doing your book, just for those 30 minutes. Set a timer. And anytime you get distracted, stop yourself and realign yourself until you finish that timer. Just start with 20, 30 minutes. The other thing is a word count. I always recommend a word count, especially for new writers. Why? Because a word count is an objective measure of how much you've done. So if you say, I am going to write 500 words today, no matter what. Like I always try to write 1,000 words a day of something, no matter what. I don't feel like I've been productive if I haven't hit 1,000 words. That's a small number when you're like a pro. But it's like, that's the minimum amount. Like if everything is going bad in the day, I gotta punch out those 1,000 words before I go to sleep or I'm going to feel bad. I just know that, right? So a word count goal is good. Start with 500. 500 is like one page. Just a page. Write a page. You can write a page. Everyone can write a page. Write a page a day. One page a day turns into 365 pages after a year. 365 pages in single-spaced Times New Roman. How many words is that? Each page is 500 words. So you just divide that in two, and that's how many thousands of words you have. 170,000 words or something, right? No, 180,200, something like that. Or 182,000. 182,500. So yeah, 1 year of drafting just 500 words a day, which you can do in 30 minutes once you get practiced, especially, will yield you the Fellowship of a book longer than the Fellowship of the Ring. Pretty decent. It's a pretty big book. It'll yield you a pretty thick book after that year. You have to look at it as like it's a process. You do a year. Like lots of people take years to write their books because they are just not efficient with it. If you're just efficient for 1 year, you can do more than most people. 30 minutes a day. Get on the treadmill and walk for 30 minutes a day, and then it's like all of a sudden I'm healthy. Yeah, it's pretty cool how little things add up. So that's my recommendation there. is to set aside time and make that your priority. And then from there, you can build. Start small and build intensity. Build length. Start with 500 words. Build up to 1,000. After you get to 1,000, build up to 1,500. After 1,500, 2,000. You get up to 2,500 words. This is a piece of advice from Stephen King. He's like, he writes 2,500 words a day. And he'll talk about that. When he retired, he cut back to 1,500 words a day so he could relax more. 2,500 words a day. Like, people are like, how does Stephen King come out with so many books? I'm like, he just writes. He writes every day. That's how he comes out with books. You know? Well, some of them are bad. So what? They're there. Better than them not existing. That's the other thing too, is that I talk about as you get into the book, is like, you have to let go of this idea that you're going to throw up words on the page that are going to be perfect, and just accept that you're going to need to do some revision, that you'll make some mistakes, that you'll probably ship with typos, even if you have proofreaders. I learned that from experience too, that you need to proofread yourself as well as have others proofread it. Also use Grammarly to find mistakes. Don't take their grammar suggestions, but do find their like correctness stuff and consider it. They're often wrong with commas, for instance. If you're looking at Grammarly and you're like, is this comma correct? Chances are their use of comma is actually not correct. There's many different ways to use commas. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's the main thing. You got to know where your priorities are. Maybe one of your priorities is like exercise. Maybe you are like a fitness freak. That's okay. That's great. Figure out where writing fits in relation to that. You need to work out an hour every day. Okay. Well, maybe writing is a 20 minutes a day thing. And for Bill down the street, maybe he works out 20 minutes and he writes for 2 hours. Whatever, right? Everybody has different priorities, so it's okay. It's okay to write less than another person. Just write the amount that you feel like you can do. So that's the main thing. Like, get your priorities aligned and get to working every day. If you're able to just do that, you will be able to finish your book. Stick to that. Have that schedule. You will be able to finish your book. That's the other thing. Just a quick overview of the other keys. I'll list them for you. Align your priorities. Establish a creative process. That's what I'm talking about with a daily routine. And I talk about a lot of this stuff, like making sure your work environment works for you. If noise distracts you, get into a quiet environment, etc. Establish effective goals. So we'll talk about that as we get into like how to write a book. An effective goal is something like, I'm going to write 500 words a day, versus I'm going to write a best-selling book. One of those you can easily accomplish. The other one requires you to like hit 50 times in a row. Right? You can't determine how much people are going to like your book to like the full extent, you know. But you can determine whether or not you sit down and do the work today. I'm going to have an effective goal. I'm going to finish my draft. I'm going to write this many words a day. I'm going to finish my draft by like June or something. Those are goals that you can actually hit, versus I want to be a professional writer. Okay, well, what the hell does that mean? How much money are you going to make per year? Oh, I'm going to make $100,000 a year. Well, how the hell are you going to make $100,000? I'm going to do these things at the 20 books to 50K, right? Before you know it, you're breaking it down and you're just kind of like magically wishing for an outcome. An effective goal is something that's limited, that's definable, that is quantifiable to an extent, and can actually be measured. Writing 500 words a day. Oh, my document is 500 words longer. I met my goal today. Great job. What are some of the other ones? Growth mindset. That's really just about, it doesn't really matter for this stream, but it's that you're always going to be improving what you're doing. That you view everything that you do as both a thing itself and as an opportunity to get better and to grow and to increase your abilities. Talk about the professional mindset, which is you should approach everything that you do with seriousness and not spend time being an amateur or doing exercises. Everything you do should be something that you'd be proud to do, right? This is actually something that you can pick up from Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen's like, I never practice. You know that's like not true from a strict definitional standpoint. He spends a lot of time with his guitar practicing. What he means by that, he goes, I never pick up my guitar with anything in mind other than great music is going to come out of it. I never pick up my guitar to play scales by themselves or something, right? Like everything is to get, he's like practicing to get faster, but it's like, I'm never practicing, I'm performing, right? Every time he picks up the guitar, he's like professional. There's an outcome in mind for every note that he plays. Every time he picks up the guitar, he has some kind of outcome in mind. Talk about the farmer mindset, which is just your priorities again, right? Like making sure you do the things you have to do and don't let them go. Don't go to sleep till you get your 500 words done. Avoid perfectionism. That's something that we'll talk about with the writing process. Consume art. Some people don't like the word consume. I mean, like you have to be receptive of things, right? If you spend all your time writing and no time reading, you actually will lose your ability to write correctly. You'll lose that sense of knowing what good words are supposed to sound like and what they're supposed to look like on the page. You need to be reading, right? I spend a lot of time reading every day. It's very spread out across my day. Like I don't sit down and read for 2 hours, but I read when I wake up. I'm reading in lots of little stints, whether it's an article, I'll be reading Brian's blog, or I'll be reading Alex's blog, and then I'll be reading a book, and then I'm listening to an audiobook maybe, and I'm doing all of these different things that are putting books into me. And at the same time, I consume other art, right? I occasionally will watch a show or a movie. I watched the Hobbit cartoon with my son this afternoon, my son and daughter, and that was great to watch again. And I play video games, and I listen to music all the time too. So, and then the last one's break the rules. Okay. So all that stuff is part of establishing your process. If you're excluding the receptive part of art, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure, in my opinion. So don't do that. Okay. Now we'll break down, how do I write a book? Like, what's the process for creating a book go? Okay. So that's the next thing we'll talk about. I'm going to turn on the fan because it's actually getting hot in here with this computer on, even though it's really cold outside. So give me just a second. I'll be right back. All right, let's get a little fan noise going in here. What do y'all say? A little bit of fan noise. I'm wearing green. Let's put on the hat. All right, let's take a look at the chat, and then I will talk about the process for writing a book in particular. So, hope you guys are. Sorry for the late start. If you're jumping in now, I was talking to the void because I got confused. I had a boomer tech moment where I was like, restream. I started streaming. I'm like, wait, Restream's on. I'm just made a new stream on a bunch of channels, and we got to turn that off. We'll be doing that next week, though. So you can actually watch this on Twitter, hopefully next week, as well as some other streams. Hardwick, hope you're doing great. What ties me up is filling in my complete outline. I usually get stumped at what to do for some parts of the plot. You know what? That is really common, right? And for me, I always think about what are the big problems that we have to solve. And then I can kind of work backwards from there. It's kind of like story algebra. Sparkle vampires in story algebra. Like, why do the vampires sparkle? Well, it's just working back from the necessity of putting Edward in to a high school with Bella in Twilight the solution to that was the vampires sparkle in the sun, and that's why they need to be under the clouds, right? That they don't actually burn up. They're sparkle vampires. So sparkle vampires are kind of a story algebra solution to a problem with the setup of the story. It's a kind of a weird solution, but that's what makes the story kind of coherent in itself. Is like I'm explicitly changing something about vampire lore, like that you would normally use, that kind of stuff. When I do an outline, my outlines tend to be pretty thin. Maybe I'll try to dig one up. People will be like, "This is how little you outline." I'm like, yeah. All the stuff is in my mind. It's just a reminder of what event happens, my event sequence. So anytime I'm writing, I go to my outline. I'm like, okay, I know what event's happening. This will sound, maybe completely arrogant or bizarre, but like I actually don't need the outline once I've written it. The story already exists complete in my head. I'm just putting it on paper, right? So I put things down on the outline that I need to make sure I remember, like place names and things like that. So I have place names, I have character names, and then I have an event sequence. And I pretty much just go through that event sequence till the book's done. Not much to it. And for each individual scene, I don't write a ton of detail in my outline for that. I just know, okay, then this happens. Like they go here and they sneak past a group of orcs. Okay. Then I write a scene where they do that. And then like the particulars of how they do it may not be in the outline. I just kind of think of those up as I get to the scene. And I just kind of, that's my pants writing part. My pants writing part is like, I don't think the particulars of how the scene's going to work till I get to it. But I know that there's events that are going to happen in that scene. So where they might be, what the scenery might be like, that's kind of up to my mood sometimes. Like, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to have some fog here. I'm going to put in a sunset and like these colors, but it's going to be cold and clammy. And then they're going to have this conversation about the intransigent nature of memory while this event happens. That's the way I do it. So I keep it pretty light. It's a really common thing though. Like, what do I do for this little part? Every Minute of Rain went back and listened to Sad Magic, which is also right up there for me. Thank you, George. Yeah, paper plates. So I'll tell you how I solved part of my time problem back in Las Vegas. I unabashedly used styrofoam cups and paper plates because my schedule was so stacked. Really, it wasn't, but I just didn't want to spend time doing dishes. And my roommate and I did the math, and we figured out that for like $15 a month, we could eat every meal with styrofoam cups and paper plates. We're like, would you pay $15 a month to not do dishes? And the answer was, yes, we will pay $15 a month to not do dishes. And so that's what we did. We didn't do dishes for like 2 years. We went to Costco. We bought a big stacks of whatever cheap paper plates. Not the cheapest, actually. We actually got pretty good ones that would like hold your food. And then we had a big box of styrofoam cups. And that was great. Like the styrofoam cups were amazing because, I'm going to go to the gym. Put my pre-workout in that styrofoam cup. Throw it away at the gym. Don't have to worry about cleaning out some kind of messy fruit punch flavored grossness afterwards. Same thing with like protein shakes. And one of the reasons we did this was our dishwasher at our apartment got completely clogged up with protein powder. Because, we put the cups in, washed them out, but like it was completely clogged up with old protein powder from washing all our dishes. We're like, we got to figure out a solution. The solution was, styrofoam cups. And then from there, we're like, we might as well just drink everything out of styrofoam cups. Drink all the tea and the coffee out of styrofoam cups. No reason for anything else. So, yeah. But you know what? The thing is that that was 2 single dudes. And I have 4 people. And like the little people would be wanting, I want strawberries now. And can I have bread and butter and beef jerky and like all these things? Better to have the plates and wash them. So, it'd be really wasteful if we were doing everything on paper plates. I also get stuck trying to decide questions like, should the space travel in this universe be faster than light or just rocket ships? It's whatever the story demands, I feel like. I had a story in Prophet of the Godseed that was completely built around a hard limit to the speed of light. The entire universe was constructed around that hard limit. Because so few people just, like, we want to discard it so that we can have the age of exploration in space, right? So we can have the Odyssey in space, like Star Trek. But it's like, I didn't want that. I wanted something that was a little, had that weird limitation. Like, what would the consequences of that be? And so it did some story algebra with that and came up with like the Spacer clans that basically live for thousands of years because they're traveling very close to the speed of light, where time passes very, very slowly. And so they go around forming colonies, but they themselves don't stay on the colonies. They go around the galaxy, and then they have some deeper set goals where they're trying to get faster and faster, to where, one of them believes like if he reaches the speed of light, he can like go back, or exceeds the speed of light, finds a way to do that, he can like go back to the beginning of the universe and meet God, right? You have weird ideas like that. Glad to catch one of these lives again. My wife and I just welcomed our first child. Well, congratulations. Definitely trying to get my creative workflow down pat again since my priorities have massively shifted. Yep. Kids will do that, and that's great. The big thing I figured out after my first child was born was, like, how do I do all the things I did before? It's like, you can't. So you have to decide what you're going to cut back on. And yeah, I cut back on some leisure activities, right? I had to cut back on video games, but I figured out if I cut back on them completely, then I would actually be miserable because it's like, why am I alive if there's no fun, right? You got to have some fun in your life. That's why I have that consume art part. Fun is also part of it. Fun is mandatory, in my opinion. I had to realign my fitness priorities. I also had plantar fasciitis in both my feet, which meant I couldn't exercise. And I had to come to a hard grip on like what it means to be healthy. And, I gained a bunch of weight, and then I had to just redo my diet. I thought I had a pretty clean diet, and compared to maybe like your typical American, I did have a really clean diet, but not so clean that I didn't gain weight when I stopped doing like an hour of cardio a day. I had to turn that around. I had to get a much even cleaner diet. And I figured out like how to have a clean enough diet that I didn't just gain weight all the time, while still having some things in the diet that I enjoyed eating. So yeah, that was hard. It was really hard. But, once you have that figured out, like where your priorities are, then it's a little bit easier to kind of put things in their place. Like I have a set of golf clubs. I should just sell them. It'll be so many years before I have enough free time that I would even consider golfing. Golfing would be so low on the list compared to other things I could do, such as go shooting. I'd rather go down to the range than go golfing. I have like a driving range like around the corner from my house too. And I'm like, dude, am I going to go to that? Probably not. I should just get rid of the golf clubs. That's how it is. Making the bed is a strange ritual to me as well. Jordan Peterson would be so sad that your bed is not made. I don't think he would care because I have enough mastery over my life. Like the bed is not an issue. Like the point of making your bed is that you start with something that you have total control over when you feel out of control with your life, and you can control that, and you can then from there you build outward, right? It's actually not a bad way to think about it at all. You start with what you can control, and then you add to that. It's the same thing with like, let's say you want to get in shape. You want to get like fit. Okay. You want to lose some weight maybe. It doesn't matter. You don't start by like, I'm going to run a marathon today. You will fail. Okay. You start with, I'm going to walk on the treadmill. Start by walking on the treadmill for 20 minutes. Start by walking on the treadmill for 15 minutes. You can always build length and intensity later. Start by walking on the treadmill. Next week, walk a little faster, walk a little longer. You build up your intensity as you go. You start with what you can do and do consistently every day. That's why I say start with like 20, 30 minutes and like 500 words. Then you build up with it as time goes, and you'll be more and more, you'll be better and better at it. Do you start by like, man, I'm going to do 18 sets of chest today for my first workout. Buddy, you are not going to go back to the gym after doing 18 sets of chest for your first workout because you will feel awful. Besides, you should always start with legs. Like, imagine going like a guy who hasn't worked out and he's like, okay, today we're doing squats. And you're making him do 6 sets of squats, 6 sets of deadlifts, and then it's like, now we're doing calves, we're doing hamstrings, we're doing all this stuff, right? And then like the next day he can't even get out of bed. Is he going to go back to the gym? No. You start with like, okay, we're going to do like a set of squats. Because you never done, like you're going to feel sore from doing that. So you start with what you can do, and then later you build the intensity, like once you're used to it. So it's the same thing with anything else, right? You start with what you can manage. Oh, I'm going to make my bed. And then, I'm going to have order and dominion over my kitchen, and I'm going to order myself so that I'm getting to work on time, right? You build out from there. The flaw in that is like that at a certain point, I would just let my bed, stop caring about my bed because I have mastery over, writing books, or mastery over feeding my children, mastery over educating them, right? And I'm not perfect in every, I'm everything could be improved, but I don't feel out of control in my life. If you feel like, man, I am out of control and there's nothing I can do correct in my life, yeah, start with making your bed. It's not a bad place to start. Start with cleaning your room. Making your bed is the biggest scam in the world. I felt this as a kid. I felt it as an adult. Yeah. As a kid, it was like, why? Like no one's, and the thing is that no one goes in my bedroom to see if the bed is made, right? The bed is for sleeping. The bed is not for playing or for looking at. That's just my opinion, right? Maybe some people like to have a made bed. I make my bed at night just before I get in it. Not for aesthetics, but because I find it uncomfortable to lie in it otherwise. I need to have sheets pulled tight with no bubbles. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a huge amount of sense. It's like I like to have the sheets tucked in right and like laying properly, and then they get messed up as you sleep, so you remake them. But you make it to look nice for the people who don't look in your bedroom. I don't do that. I also struggle with perfectionism, which is exacerbated by my obsessive compulsive disorder. Yeah. So figuring out how to master OCD is another thing too. So I avoid perfectionism is one of the things in here. And there's a big reason for that. Most of the time, people are not actually perfectionist. Now, you might have a disorder that this is different. I'm just going to talk about most people. Most people are not actually perfectionists at all. Rather, they are regular people with regular motivations, including fear of judgment. They don't want other people to think their book sucks. I don't want people to think my book sucks, right? So they don't want other people to think their work sucks, which means they feel that they need to revise it until it's perfect, lest somebody dare say something bad against them and make them feel bad. This is a natural thing. As human beings, we're not adapted to the internet. The internet is not an environment that we are naturally made for. Lots of people, lots of strangers telling you to kill yourself is not a normal thing if we're looking at the entirety of history, right? Humans lived in small groups, clans, and tribes where how other people felt about you really mattered. Keep in mind, like the third and fourth people in the Bible, like the fourth human that existed killed the third human that existed. Think about that for a minute, right? Like it's dangerous if someone doesn't like you in your small group. We get out on the internet, we have reviews, we have all of this criticism that flies around against us, and it's natural to want to find some way to protect yourself from that. There's other ways to do it besides being a perfectionist. So you have to let it go that some people are not going to like your book, right? There's something that I started doing this a couple years ago, and it massively improved my experience on social media, which is I block people. I block people early and I block them often. Why do I block so many people? I don't actually block that many people. If I find somebody really annoying or really insulting, it's more charitable for me to block that person than it is for me to do what my impulse says, which is to attack them back and to like rip them apart. They're not attacking me because they hate me, right? They don't know me and know anything about me, right? So it's not like a threat. So knowing it's not a threat, what should I do so that I don't have to experience all of the bad emotions that people direct towards me? Well, I just need to block them. Versus me like attacking the person or insulting them or ripping them apart. I used to do that, and it's like what you want to do. Versus if somebody respectfully disagrees, that's great. I love that because I can have a kind rebuttal. And believe it or not, like that happens a lot. Most people are not insane, but you're meeting a stranger on the internet who's mentally ill or drunk or high. Like, why would you want to have that conversation with that person? It's actually more charitable. And I'm using charity like in the classic, maybe the medieval sense. It's not loving to that person for me to insult them and tell them to kill themselves or something like that. It's better to just block them so that I don't have to listen to that, and so that I'm not tempted to say mean and horrible things to that person. So that's the other thing, right? It's like filtering your interactions so that they're actually with the people that energize you, that give you good feedback, that are positive towards you, that point you in the right direction, that give you good ideas, that do all of the good things for you, right? Those are the people that you want to have those open lines of communication with. I see people even on Twitter, like they're talking to some mentally ill author who published a book like 8 years ago that's awful, who's like hell bent on talking about how bad indie fiction is. Like, why don't you just block this person and move on with your life? It's better for that person because your tendency to argue with them is something that is desire to hurt them. Like it's wrath. You're giving into your wrath. And I don't want to give in to my wrath, right? I want to control that. I don't want unrestricted anger towards other people. So for me, blocking other people is me being charitable and loving towards that person, even though they're doing things and saying things that I don't like and that annoy me. And usually, even if somebody is really like bad, I'll just leave the comments up, and it's when it becomes a pattern. I notice the same person comments like 4 times on different videos. I'm like, okay, you're good. You're gone. Right. It's like a random person stopping by to tell me why they think like I should have my eyes gouged out or something. Yeah, I'll probably block that person. But more often it's because I notice the person's like stalking me or something, right? It's like, yeah, the problem's with them. I don't need that in my life. So yeah, figuring out how to filter that so that you can maintain your ego integrity without it and improve yourself, have that growth mindset without you being crushed is really important. So on the internet, keep in mind, you're a tribal person. We lived in small families for thousands of years. You're not a person that's made to deal with hundreds of people on the internet talking about how much you hate them or how much they hate you. Okay. Sorry, I missed a bunch of stuff. Another thing I find difficult is character interactions and multi-character dialogue. My writing tends to wind up like Lovecraft's, very solitary. Yeah, once you get more than about 3 characters involved in a dialogue scene, it starts to get chaotic. But if you look at something like Tolkien, who often had 9 or more characters in every that were present for the dialogue, you realize that, yeah, you can have a lot of characterization that happens with a lot of characters. You just have to choose when they say things and how they say those things, and you can get a lot of characterization in there. Surprising amount. And not every character characters can be silent in scenes. Not every character has to give their 2 cents. You know what I mean? That reluctance to get started on a writing session is great. It's basically a chance to overcome something. Yeah. And then let's think about a process for beginning your writing session. I'll just give you a really easy one that I use a lot, right? Go in, sit in my chair, turn on my computer, open up my document, right? That's really easy. But it's a thing of I'm going into a room. I'm leaving the toys behind. I'm leaving the children behind. I'm leaving the cat behind. Although the cat will come in and sit on my lap sometimes anyway. I'm leaving stuff behind. I'm going to where I'm working. Boom, I'm in a new mode, new mindset. If you need more steps to like fully ease into it, that's great. Turn on whatever music you like to have on in the background. I started to put a lot of background noise on a year or two ago because it was so noisy where I was that I just needed something. So put on my headphones, put on the music. Look at my outline. Think about what I'm going to write. That's my pre-write. Some people write as a pre-write. You can do that too. Whatever. Think about what you're going to write. Look at your outline. Think about how you're going to accomplish that. Begin writing. And before you know it, you're getting those. Even if you have to delete the first sentence like 8 times, start writing the first sentence. Going, I'm going to write a sentence and maybe I'll delete it. And just keep going. And then if you need to go back to the beginning and go, you know what, that sentence was bad, I'm going to rewrite it. You can do that. It's great. I feel that books are a bit too self-indulgent when I tried writing them. The limits of scripts forces me to get the important parts through and not waste time. Write enough words. That's how you fill up a book. Well, I mean, the goal is to write a good book. But believe it or not, like write enough words. That's a daunting task when you're talking 100,000 words. Most people don't finish writing a book because it's a long time commitment. It's not like I'm going to write a book. I could write a script over the weekend, right? Writing movie scripts is really easy because it's a lot less writing, frankly. A 2-hour movie script, I can bang that out in a couple days, especially if I already know what I'm writing for the story. I'm not having to write prose. I'm not having to write prose that sounds good, that is interesting and beautiful, right? You just have to write dialogue. So you're really, the directions that you write in a script don't really have to be beautiful. They just have to be clear for the director. So it really cuts out a lot of the artistry of a book when you write a script, because the artistry is the visuals of a movie, right? It makes a lot of sense. So yes, of course, scripts are a lot easier to write because there's a lot less writing to be done. There's a lot less craft that has to go into writing a script versus a book. It's not me trying to crap on screenwriters because, I don't need to crap on them. I can just go watch Hollywood movies to see how bad they are. But really just to say that like writing a script is easier than writing a book as far as the amount of effort. Having done both, I've written multiple feature-length scripts and multiple sitcoms and stuff like that. I've written a lot of scripts. I've written comic scripts. I've written everything. Novels are way harder if you want to do them right. Consume art's another of my weaknesses. I rarely find time to read in books. Try audiobooks. So like you have chores, find a book you want to read, right? I should have like audiobook recommendations. If you've never read Lord of the Rings, get the Andy Serkis Lord of the Rings version, buy it from Audible, put in your headphones, just listen to it when you wash your dishes. Let that story get into you, right? Most of the classic books that I would recommend people read, there's an audiobook version of them out there somewhere. There's even some of my books have audiobook versions. So yeah, audiobooks are a great way to cram that in. And then you feel like, okay, I have to do my dishes, but I'm still getting some art in. I'm still getting some art in, which is good. Matt Stone and Trey Parker have one of the best bits of writing advice. Yeah, I think we've talked about that the other week. Watching this while I'm on another stream. Have a great one, Brian, with that stream. As for writing, how much do you mine personal experience to sell reinforced characterization or plot? That's a great question. A lot. But you can't experience everything. A lot of it has to be imagined. I can't experience a mythical dragon, right? I can experience what it's like to be afraid of a beast, having been like attacked by a dog. So that fear you feel when you're attacked by a dog, you can translate into the fear of fighting a dragon, because getting attacked by a dog when you're a kid is really scary. There's lots of things like that. So knowing what those emotions feel like, you can then transpose those into other stressful situations. You can't know every single situation. It's more just like knowing how things feel. I do the same thing with cups for protein shakes. Get tired of cleaning the same gross shaker every day. Throw that shit away. What do you think of coffee? I don't drink coffee, but I do drink caffeine. I find it's beneficial if you've not had it for a while, but the tolerance builds up really fast. That's true, and this has been studied, is that there is like a point where like it just doesn't do anything anymore. I haven't touched my tennis racket in forever. Realistically, don't have the time. Yeah, I just have to pick what I'm going to do. And like golf is not on it. And honestly, shooting is not either. I need to like cut down my gun collection as well. Keep the stuff that I'm actually going to shoot. It's like I'd like to get more into archery and trap shooting, but it's hard to find the time because it's just not a priority. So making it a priority means cutting something else out. Great advice. When starting, sort of stung when explaining why I prefer to certain works over others using valid points, but someone just revert to baseless general opinion blast. That's true. LibriVox is a cool app. A lot of classics and obscure works turned into free audiobooks. Also, the Gutenberg Project, if you want to listen on a web page or just download it like that. It has a lot of great stuff. There's free audiobooks on my channel. Let me find one. I did a Solomon Kane audiobook. So, occasionally I record audiobooks for free. Boom, here's one. Copy that link. Put it in the chat. Now you can read Solomon Kane and say you have read Solomon Kane while you do the dishes. Audiobooks have been a lifesaver. My reading speed has slowed down a lot in my 30s compared to teens and early 20s. Retention still there though. My reading speed is still high, but I don't have a lot of time to just really sit and dig into a book a lot. I have to read in bursts. That's just the way my life is. It's kind of filling up the edges with reading. All right. Let's transition to talk about what is the process for writing a book? Let's think about something bigger than you sit down and write every day, because there's a lot more to it than that. So there's 4 stages that go into creating a book. Those stages are planning, drafting, revision, and publication. And there's things that happen in each of those 4 stages that you need to learn and you need to know about. Most people think of stage 2, drafting, as writing the book. This is why you won't finish your book if you think stage 2, drafting, is writing your book. You need to start with an outline. Brian is, I've had Brian on the channel many times. If you don't follow him on Twitter, he will hammer this home a lot more than I would, but he does a lot more editing. You're either outlining before you write or you're outlining after you write, and it's much easier to outline before you write. Outlining does not mean you have to cut all of the fun out of your writing. Doesn't mean you have no room for spontaneity. Doesn't mean you have to suck the magic out of the writing process. But like I said, it's not magic. It's more about sweat than it is it's perspiration more than inspiration. If you want to actually finish your book. So phase 1, outlining. That is planning. There's a couple things that go in the planning phase. Number 1 is planning the book. That means figuring out what is going to happen in your story. What is the setting, the characters, and the plot of your book? So that's phase 1, right? You're also going to plan how you're going to write the book. In other words, the process by which you will write the book. And I'm kind of explaining it to you. So you're like, okay, I planned this. I'm going to write, I expect it to be 50,000 words. Now, you won't, if you're new to this, you're going to figure out how long things are as you do it. I'm expecting it to be about 50,000 words. If I write 1,000 words a day, I'll be done roughly 2 months, let's say. Okay, cool. So I have a 2-month timeline to do this. I'm going to write this 1,000 words every day, and I know what's going to happen in the book. I know that when I finish with the book, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to revise it or edit it, or maybe I'm going to hand it to an editor and pay an editor to give me a bunch of feedback and get into the revision phase. How am I going to publish it? Am I going to traditionally publish it, or am I going to self-publish it? Most of my books are self-published because that's how they're going to exist, right? Especially as a writing weird genre fiction, which is what I do as a straight white male. I kind of have to do it myself. I have to have the punk mindset in order to get my crap out there. And I've definitely done some weird things, like things that, what's cool about being independent is like I can publish books that I don't care if anybody reads. And, you know, if I publish a book that lots of people read, I get all the money, which is great too. But, you know, maybe you're that person who really needs that New York publishing house to tell them what a good boy or good girl they are and give them a head pat, maybe a small advance. It'll feel good. I got paid to write. And you want to go through that multi-year process to do that. Okay, you're going to plan to do that. I'm going to start querying agents after I do this. So you have to learn. You have to, for the planning phase, you have to plan how you're going to do it. You also have to plan what you're going to learn. I'm going to have to learn how to revise. I'm going to have to learn how to query agents that will talk to the publisher for me, because I'm not allowed to just talk to a publisher. And then the agent's going to take my money and wait, you know. So yeah, you have to learn how to query agents, how to write a cover letter, how to write a synopsis, start researching what agents might actually talk to you. You have to do all that. Okay, that's planning phase. Then comes the drafting phase. This is what most people think of as writing the book. It's where you sit down, you have your document, you take your outline, and you start writing the book. Okay. Maybe I should move back to outlining, because like outlining is its own thing. You need to know what characters are going to be in your drama. You write down the names of the characters. Boop, 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 boop. Then you can write down any setting notes that are important, especially if you're writing science fiction or fantasy. You're going to want to have some setting notes to keep things in order. Write those down. Then you just write the event sequence, and that's your outline. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. If you want to, you can break it down into plots and subplots, which I've talked about. The main plot is the conflict. So you need to know what's the problem that needs to be solved. And here's the event sequence that leads me to solve it, to maybe where the characters almost solve it. You know, come up with some obstacles that stop the characters, right? We talked about that in the plot format. So you just write down your event sequence. Maybe for your A story and your B story, it may be a romance, and then you can have both of them and kind of intersperse them or figure out how you're going to mix them together, and then you have like a good little outline that you can work with. Okay. Then you go into phase 2. You just start drafting. You just go through the outline. Oh, today it's the scene. We're going to work on it, and you just draft the book. Now, some people do this differently from others. I always do it in a linear fashion. I start at the beginning. I write until I get to the end. Pretty simple. I have an outline. I know what I'm doing. Other people who are pants writers have to do that because they don't know where it ends. This is why people stop writing their book. It's why they fail to write their book and they give up. They lose confidence in themselves. Is they get writer's block. What's the writer's block? Writer's block 9 times out of 10 is I don't know what happens next. I don't know what happens next in the story. That's writer's block. If you knew what happens next, you'll like never have writer's block. You know, you might have motivation block. You might have, I think this story might actually suck block. So you might lose confidence in your story, but that's different from like, I don't know what's going to happen. So if you outline, you're always going to know what's going to happen, which is great. So you just, boom, write what's happening. And when you get to the end of the draft and write the end, after sticking to your process, that feels really good. Then you get to think about what the revision phase means. Sorry. So the revision phase is just where you're going to polish what you've written in phase 2. Go back, look at your outline. As you're drafting, one of the things that I do is that I make a list of revision notes. Like I change my mind sometimes about a story, and rather than going back and rewriting a section, I just like make a note. Okay, this needs to be changed when I do phase 3. And I have a bunch of revision notes. So that's the first thing I look at is like, I want this to line up correctly with this other thing in the beginning of the book. I need to go back and change this thing at the beginning of the book. Do things like that. The main thing, the first thing you want to look at for a revision phase is, are the story elements working? Do the events proceed logically and soundly one to the other? Are the characters coming off the way I want them to be? You know, are there any kind of stall out points, right? Does it get too slow in any part of the story? Do I need to cut things out? Is there something that's superfluous that should probably be cut out and discarded? Or can I combine different scenes for length? Do I need to fill any of it out? Do I need to add some stuff to explain things better? Or maybe the B story romance occurs a little too quickly. Maybe I need to add a couple of scenes in where the characters get to know each other better. Just kind of, and then you can add. So revision may be some addition, some subtraction, some alteration, fixing this, fixing that. All that occurs in your first thing, like what some people call story edit, where you fix all of these little things. That's like your second draft. Some people write a second draft. They like rewrite their book, which is crazy to me, but some people do that. I don't do that. And one of the reasons that I don't do that is that because I outline, the book comes out pretty close to the way I want it at the end of the draft, which means I have a lot less stuff to do in that revision phase. There's so many less things I have to fix because I bothered to think about my story before I started writing it. That's a big reason to outline, guys. If you like to write your book 3-4 times, and I have done page one rewrites on scripts, which is very annoying, it would be 10 times more annoying with a novel. If you don't want to be that guy who throws the book away and writes another book with the similar plot, then it's worth your time to outline. Be a lot less work in that revision phase. Okay. You might work with an editor, in which case you're going to maybe you do some edits yourself, you hand it to the editor, he comes back with a bunch of notes. You decide what you're going to do with those, right? Maybe follow them. Maybe you're like, this editor's an idiot and I'm going to ignore him. It's your book, so you can do that too, right? Then you get to start getting into the publication phase. Actually, before you get to that, you should probably have a phase where you're going to edit the prose and the dialogue. So this is where you are polishing the micro. You're like making the sentences really good, making the dialogue really sharp. You're going to read through your book. Anything that's awkward, you're going to pause and rewrite it. Okay. So when I do like that kind of rewrite, I'm like, oh, I'm going to change this. There's a lot of rewriting that happens without me starting with like chapter 1. Now I shall write my book again. Of course, if you write it on like a notebook, I guess you kind of have to rewrite it for the next phase, right? Do stuff like that. So you polish the micro, polish the dialogue, polish all the sentences so that they're good. Okay. Then we're getting into phase 4, which is publication. And this is where you're doing actually another level of editing, but it's really editing for publication, which is proofreading, because there's going to be typographical errors. There's going to be formatting mistakes, all the things that have to be changed to make your ebook be correct. You're going to do in that publication phase. So, fixing your fonts, fixing your indents, any kind of extra additional proofreading and formatting. You're going to do that by preparing your manuscript for publication. Once you have a manuscript that's more or less prepared for publication, you're going to do formatting for whatever thing you're going to do. So I have videos on how to format for paperback, how to format for an ebook, or you maybe are doing a manuscript format because you're going to try to send it to an agent, or you're going to submit your story to a magazine or something like that. Right? That's all in that phase 4 part. Also in there is going to be marketing. So you have to format the thing. You have to get a cover, either design one or buy one or hire someone to do that. There's a lot of business in the publication phase. You have to figure out how to promote that book to people, tell people that it's there, how to advertise it. You may have to learn a lot of skills for that. But that's that 4th phase, which is publication, which is a big phase. Lots of people stall out in publication because it's overwhelming, and it can be, especially if you're new to it. And if you're indie, there's a lot of learning you have to do. I spent a lot of time trying to create resources for people to learn these lessons that I had to learn the hard way. So hopefully you can learn them the easy way and spend less time making mistakes, making the same mistakes that I did, however, like 10 years ago or however long when I was first doing this stuff. Okay. So, learn the things that you need to learn and do those things, right? So you may have to learn advertising. You may have to learn Amazon AdWords, how to format your book, how to design a cover, or how to find an artist to do it, and then how to format the cover, properly to get it on Amazon. And you may have to learn like categories for Amazon and keywords and stuff like that. We should go back to the first phase, planning. So part of planning that I forgot to mention is deciding like what market you're going to write to. So I don't really write to market. I write the stories that I'm passionate about writing, and I have an idea of what market maybe exists for it, but I'm not going and hunting down a little niche. Like I'm going to write, I'm going to write Druid fantasy or something, right? Iron Druid stuff. So I don't go and hunt down little categories. I write the stories that I care about, and I know what genre they're in and things like that. So if you're wanting to write to market, part of your planning phase is like, I'm going to write a vampire romance because I think there needs to be more vampire romance, and I'm going to sell a lot of copies of vampire romance. I always say vampire romance because I don't know why. It's just the first one on my mind is like, that's a weird niche thing that just exploded out of like, that was very popular for a while. But it could be something else. I'm going to do military science fiction. So you have an idea of what tropes you have to include in your book when you plan it before you write it. You don't want to be like, I'm going to write military science fiction. And you get to the end and there's no Space Marines. You're like, oh, I need Space Marines in this. I have to go insert them. Like, okay, you didn't write to the tropes of the genre, so it's going to be hard to market it, right? I think of preparation as the division of creative burden. Do you want to write a whole story with nothing but a spark? Then you're doing theme, structure, dialogue, editing, etc. all at once. Yeah, that's a good point of putting it. Like dividing it so that it's not such an overwhelming thing. Like the blank page is really intimidating. Having an outline means you never have a blank page. Oh, I already wrote down some notes for this story. I just have to begin it, And you can always rewrite the beginning later. What do you do if you chronically lose confidence in your work? So Ray Bradbury says you must finish what you begin, and you must publish, and you must not rewrite except to editorial order, meaning never rewrite your books because you lose confidence. Someone may really like that. But if the editor's like, you need to rewrite this chapter, then you do it. Like you only do it if you have to do it. Otherwise, you don't rewrite. And you must publish everything. You must attempt to publish everything you write. I think Ray Bradbury understood, and a lot of people don't understand this, you can't really predict what's going to hit and what's going to miss. You can have an idea based on like, this niche, it's very popular. I should be able to make money in it. But you don't know if it's going to like explode out of that or what's going to happen. And people may really like the writing. And the other thing is, if you are not willing to finish your stories, you're never going to learn the lessons about how to write an ending to a story. If you push on and you make yourself finish the story, you will learn more from that. Trust me, I have like abandoned books halfway through their drafts, and I've always regretted it because it's so much harder to go back and finish it, even though you should. So push it out and finish the stuff you start. You'll feel much better about it. In fact, it's much better to have a complete bad draft, which you can then edit and make better, than it is to have a unfinished bad draft. Like, it's better to have one finished bad book than never have any finished books. You're going to have to get the suck out no matter what. At least try to push to the end of your story every time you write, because this is like a weakness of mine. Is like, man, this sucks. I should just like write another story. It's like, nah, you got to push it out. You got to finish it, And sometimes you get to the end of a book and you're like, it's just not ready for prime time. I need to fix some big things. And that's where I've been with a lot of books, where like my idea of what would work when I was planning it, when I finished the draft, it just didn't hit the way I wanted it to. I couldn't make it work. So I need to fix something major. That just takes some time to like do some rewriting, right? Now, I know it's like never rewrite except editorial order. It's like I should follow that advice a lot more. But I have something in mind for my product, and sometimes that means going back and doing major work to something so that it's better. That's all. Work until you achieve a major accomplishment. The confidence will follow. Yeah, you have to do the work first, and then the confidence happens afterwards. Expecting confidence, like, how do I have confidence in the ring? It's like, you have to fight people. But I don't have any confidence about fighting people. You're not going to get any confidence unless you step in the ring and fight some people. That's how it is. I've been stuck in the publication stage for about 2 years now. Yeah, it can be long depending on what you're doing. You know, there's a lot of learning that has to happen in that phase, and it's tough. And like, you may have to redo a lot of things. And the other thing too is like, you know, I've redone covers like for books that I released pretty early in my career because I was completely broke and had no way to like hire a cover artist or even use good software. And so later, once I had done all the learning, I could replace those with better covers. I did that. Did you read Bradbury's Zen in the Art of Writing? I found it at the library and read it in an evening. Great motivation insights. Yeah, so there's that, and there's like On Writing by Stephen King. These are great things to read for inspiration. But these are not things which will make you or like help you to align your priorities or think about, I have to actually sit down and do this and write it. They may inspire you to do it, but you know, it's you that has to figure out the specifics for how you're going to do it. And you can just try lots of different things and ask people like, hey, do you have any like advice for like just getting into the flow of things? It's like, you just got to get a couple words on the page and then it starts to happen. You know? Did you read the Lester Dent poll? I haven't read that yet. Sorry, just kind of had a lot going on. You never know what's going to hit. I did watch the video on the CGI though, which was really good. So Hardwick on the Discord found a good video from a VFX artist about the fact that a lot of people in these movies are lying about the amount of practical effects that they're using. And it's interesting because I think about this and like sometimes for movies I didn't see, they're like, oh, it's all practical effects. I'm like, why is that special? Like, why does that matter? And that's a deeper question. Like, he doesn't really answer that, but the fact is that studios often market with this idea that what they're doing is all practical effects. And for whatever reason, that's exciting to audiences. So like Fast and the Furious, like, oh, it's all practical effects. And then you see the sequence and it's like, that's 100% CGI. That is just an animated sequence in the middle of a movie. Now that's not bad, but it's like, it's not practical, right? This is the idea that like a real object being filmed will feel more real. But at the same time, audiences want really fantastical, crazy things. I'm not anti-CGI at all. I just wish people would be more honest about the amount of CGI that's there. Like Top Gun Maverick was an example. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, those are all real jets. Like actually, none of them are real jets. They're all CGI. It's like, what? It's like, yeah. They use these other planes just as like a mock-up and then like replace them with the CGI plane. Kind of wild to think about. And that was the thing with, I realized this with the Star Wars sequels, where people were like, George Lucas and his CGI, because I think because of like Jar Jar and his whole race, they were all CGI, right? They're like these CGI creatures. George Lucas and his CGI. We want real things. Meanwhile, they watch things that have no real objects in them, and then they're like, that's what we want. It's like, good CGI is CGI you don't notice. Whereas George didn't look at it like that. He's like, I want an alien. Let's make an alien, right? The alien never looks real because it's an alien when you stop and think about it, right? It's not a real object, and it's not intended to be a real object. But people liked the models because they had really good kind of lighting. They looked, they were good. Models were great. He used models in the prequels had more practical effects than most of these things that they say are full of practical effects. Prequels were packed with practical effects. They also use CGI with them too. They use both. That's why the production quality, I think, remains so high. And I feel like the prequels look better every time I watch them because like the aesthetic value in them is so high that like, wow, this is like a really beautiful looking scene. It just looks great. Especially on like, modern displays and that kind of stuff. When you're watching on a little VHS, it's not quite as impressive. And to be honest, like watching the original trilogy, like in 4K, you start to notice like how plastic a lot of the sets are. You're like, that's not real. That's just like painted wood. But when you were watching it on VHS in 480 on a CRT that was like 13 inches, it looked really real, back in the 80s. So I think we have some flawed memories about just how good practical effects look like. Remember how good Star Wars looked? Yeah, it still looks good. But does it look as good to you now as it did in 1988 is the real question. Because I notice a lot more flaws about the practical effects, even cleaned up in the special editions, which removed a lot of the artifacts. If you can find comparisons between the two, you'll notice that like there's like the ships are see-through. You know, like Luke's ship in Empire Strikes Back is see-through. You can see the snow going past it in the original version. They digitally took all that out with the VHS version in like the early 1990s because George didn't like that. It was like a flaw of the chroma key process from back in 1980 that you ended up with things like that. So I think, you know, just having a more balanced approach to CG be better for a lot of people. And I think people like the idea of movie magic. They're like, oh, there's like a real stuntman doing something. They're putting their life on the line to entertain us. I'm like, I don't really need that though. You know, it's okay to not. I remember people were. This is just an anecdote. In the second Matrix movie, there's a part where they have a CGI Neo like flying by the moon, and he's very CGI. But nobody noticed except for me. I was like, what's with the CGI Neo? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, when he's going over the moon, they're like, that wasn't CGI. I'm like, dude, it looked like a video game. It looked like a good video game. But even back then, I was like, that's not real. Other people don't notice it as much. It just depends on the context of what people are looking for. Are they actively looking for it? Things like that, you know? I remember J.J. Abrams releasing a bunch of photos and clips of puppets, model sets, etc. to mark The Force Awakens as using a lot of practical effects. Yeah, they did that. And then it was just mounds and mounds and mounds of CGI everywhere you looked. There were practical things in it too. Obviously, some of the sets were real, all right? There was a lot of real sets. And they actually look pretty good. I think the visual design of Force Awakens, even though it's built entirely on like nostalgia, is not bad. Like, I don't think J.J. Abrams has a bad eye for how to, like, shoot a scene or, you know, how to make sets look good and things like that. It looks like a Star Wars dream. It looks like somebody playing with Star Wars toys almost, just on a, like, $200 million level. But it doesn't look bad. I wouldn't say it looks bad. But it's not practical, and it doesn't look as good as even the prequels as far as its aesthetics go. Like, it's not that good. And it's just like CGI ships flying every which way and a giant CGI planet. There's so much CGI in it. But it's like people didn't even see the CGI because they were like, well, we were told it was practical effects. Therefore it was. Okay. I can't believe you couldn't tell that there was like all these computer generated elements in it. They did a good job with the CGI. It wasn't bad. I don't think it was bad, but it was definitely CGI. You know. Yeah, you never know what's going to hit. It's like the titular track in an album that sounds like a clunker compared to one stuff near the end. That's true. There's a, you know, I think I talked about Yes on the stream at one point. Like the worst album cover ever. It's that 90215 album cover from 1983, I think. And the hit song, Owner of a Lonely Heart, the band Yes did not like. Originally, the band was going to be called Cinema. But by the time they finished making the band, it was everyone from Yes minus Steve Howe. So they just were Yes again. They're like, this is not a Yes song. They had written the song, but they just didn't have confidence in it. And the producer, who was actually a former Yes vocalist, he got convinced, no, this will be a big hit. You have to do it. And it turns out, yep, that was a big hit. He had the right instincts on it. The band was like wanting to throw that track away, Owner of a Lonely Heart. And for most Yes fans, they're like, Owner of a Lonely Heart, I don't really like that song. But the other songs on the album were good, you know? It's a weird thing, right? It's kind of like, what's the Sugar Ray song? I Just Want to Fly, right? The whole song is like aggressive hard rock and heavy metal. And then it's all new metal, right? So the first Sugar Ray album, it's all like full bore new metal, except for that last song. What happened? It's a huge hit. Crap, what do we do? I know. Let's just completely change the band sound so that the next album is nothing but that. And they did that. Weird, right? So Sugar Ray, I use this as an example, like you never know what's going to hit. They just kind of had a weird change up song on there. And the version that was a hit wasn't even the original version of the song. It was like a remix version with some rapper rapping on top of it. It's like a terrible version of the song. It's like way worse than the regular version. But that's what hit. That became the hit for the band. And so your Limp Bizkit style nu metal full bore distortion band became like a soft rock band overnight. Wild. I had a movie producer. I wrote a script basically about that happening to a band, and the movie producer's like, that's not realistic. I'm like, I could show you like 5 bands that happened to. It's like the most realistic music story I can think of writing, is that the song that is not your normal style becomes the breakout hit, and then you have to decide what to do after that. Best way to get in the flow? Music. I think so. You can listen to my channel. Where is it? There it is. Copy. The Zool channel. Did that go? Copy. It did not go. There it goes. Good background music. Good background music. Most bad CGI is due to overworked CGI. CGI artists are overworked in general, is my understanding. Rushing to do too much too fast, and most of that is caused by reshoots due to filming with an unfinished script. I've heard that as well. So there's an interesting thing, thinking of Star Wars, like Rogue One, something like 40% of the movie was reshot. So they took the movie away from the director, took his version of the movie. I would love to see like what he originally wrote. They reshot 40 of it. My understanding was that all of the Darth Vader stuff was added. So the studio went back in and was like, this movie sucks. And they just added 40, they reshot 40% of the movie and then somehow shipped it. So if there's anything bad in that movie, like CGI wise, it's probably because they were like, okay, the movie was finished in December, it comes out in May, and somehow we reshot 40% of the movie. Wow. Hey, another reason to have a good script before you start shooting. I've heard that as well, yeah. That like they start shooting and then they change the script. You can actually see in Force Awakens like where the script changes based on like things that J.J. Abrams said. It's like originally we planned to have Luke and Rey doing stuff, and then we decided not to do that, which basically means like the studio said you shouldn't do that. So like they set up the movie with this whole thing of like we're going to go get Luke Skywalker, and then halfway through the movie they just abandoned that. So it's really clear that they didn't have a full shooting script when they started Force Awakens. They just kind of started making the movie, and then the script changed halfway through. You can almost find down to the minute where like they stopped shooting one movie and started shooting another one, and then kind of backfilled. They're like, okay, it's going to be about this now. And there's the lightsaber that fell into the clouds. Here you go. And then we'll go blow up the Death Star 3. Trevor Horn, yes. He was the former singer. There was another, Trevor Rabin was the guitarist that replaced Steve Howe. And I'm trying to remember who they got on keyboards. He was one of the early Yes keyboards. They brought him back in the band. I hated the Eagle lyric in Owner of a Lonely Heart and put a shotgun crack sound right after the lyric. Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that story. That's great. So Trevor Horn is often called like the man who invented the 80s. And you can hear the sound of his production style on that Yes album. And really what I would say is this is really weird to think about. The sound of 80s pop was created by 70s prog rock bands. Because you had a huge influence on 80s music coming from like Peter Gabriel, a former singer of Genesis, which was a prog rock band, Genesis themselves, and Phil Collins. Influences on the way they wrote their music, the way they produced their music, that ultra clean, very airy sound coming out of English prog rock bands from the 70s that had these huge, full, overblown production styles in the 70s, did things at the beginning of the 80s and maybe even at the end of the 70s that like really influenced the production sound of the 80s in weird ways. That sparkling, clean 80s sound kind of started with prog rock bands experimenting with that like in the late 70s and around 1980 and into the early 80s. So but by the time you get those really clean sounds in like 1987, it's like, well, it came from 70s prog rock bands. It's weird. Bands like that clean sound on Moving Pictures by Rush. It's like this classic 80s production where the reverb's super controlled, everything's kind of spacey, airy. Every instrument is like clearly defined and you can easily hear the separation between every instrument. That kind of 80s production. It's really interesting to see how that kind of came about. The first Van Halen record, I think, was very influential on 80s production in the pop area, less so than the metal area. The printer's printing something for some reason. In the metal area, it went for more for like further development of the 70s wall of sound. But in the pop area, it went for like that super clean separation. And I heard that Eddie Van Halen actually hated the production on that first Van Halen album. He didn't like it. And the reason he didn't like it is they put him in one channel and like his solos in another channel. And like the bass, like, so he was in the left channel and the bass player was in the right channel. And then David Lee Roth was in the center. And it's like if somebody was in the back seat of a car and one of the speakers was out, it'd be like there's no guitar on the album. So he did not like that full panning at all. Now, that could be apocryphal. I could be misremembering that. But I seem to remember him having complaints about that. Another big influential album, of course, was Thriller, right? Which had a bunch of prog rock musicians on it. It had Toto. So really funny to think about how that developed. I think the CGI in Rogue One looks great, oddly enough. The textures in the scenes of the spaceships flying through the rain look extremely real. I don't think it looks bad. You know, and I say that, you know, I'm like, it's reusing the aesthetics of the OT. It's nostalgic aesthetic reuse. So its aesthetic value is like, let's make a movie that looks like a Star Wars movie. Let's have a plot that looks like a Star Wars plot. Let's have villains that look like Star Wars villains. It's just kind of an imitative act of Star Wars. There's not a lot of depth to it. Even if the technicians and the artists that worked on it were very skilled with what they did. And I think they were. It's weird how every Star Wars movie had some sort of rewrite or director change partway through, except Last Jedi, which probably deserved it the most. Yeah, that's a good point. Gated Drums is from Peter Gabriel, and Phil Collins took it further in his solo career. Yeah, the gated drum, I mean, so if you don't know what the gated drums, it has this kind of schwap sound. It's where you you cut off, there's a noise gate, so you cut off the reverb of the drum. So the drum sounds very full, and then it's nothing. And it's just an interesting snare sound. You can set it up in your production as well. The main thing that I get from, I guess, some of Peter Gabriel's albums, but really like with the Trevor Horn production, is the like separation of instruments. So you don't need to like gate the snare. In fact, a lot of stuff from the 80s really doesn't have that gated snare, but you will hear something from the 80s. You're like, that sounds like it's from the 80s, simply because the instruments are so separate from one another. The guitar is so clean, you know, the reverb is so controlled. You used to have a different sound for reverb in the 70s. You go back and listen to early 70s stuff with their reverb, and it sounds like a big booming room. And then what they started doing in the 80s is they just kind of changed their production style. They had better consoles and better equipment. So you could record everything dry and then like add all the reverb in post as you went. You used to have to do weird things to add reverb in post, where like you'd have a speaker like going into a room. You just do weird things to add reverb, but you had all these outboard reverb stuff. So the reverb got way better in the 80s, much cleaner, much more tightly controlled, better decay. You could control it for every instrument so that you didn't lose the sound of the drums. So you get this weird thing in the 70s where like you can't hear all the drums. It drives me nuts sometimes because I will listen to like Rainbow or something, and then there's points in the Rainbow song where like Cozy Powell just sounds like like his bass drum has no definition because it gets lost in the chaos of the overall thing that's going on. Fast forward to the 80s and you hear Cozy Powell recordings, and like every single like drum attack is completely articulate and clean, and you're like, almost doesn't sound like the same drummer, even though it is, but the production for like even the later Black Sabbath stuff was just so much cleaner in the 80s. It's like a completely different world. And it had to do with a lot of the production techniques. I'm not an expert on that album. I mean, I've produced albums in the past. Like I am a recording engineer, but I wasn't around in 1983 to see exactly what they were doing. I've just kind of like watched a lot of them talk about that kind of stuff. And, you know, this approach to having all the separation of the instruments, that's the big sound you get from the 80s. So like 70s has that big booming, big mid-rangey wall of sound. 80s, it's like clean. The mid-range is really occupied by the voice. Everything's really squeaky clean. And then the 90s, you start to get more into like a louder, fuller sound again. And then the 2000s is all about maximized volume. Things are as loud as they could possibly get, to where you get an album like Death Magnetic. They can actually give you headaches. They compress the sound so much that everything just sounds like mono volume loud, and it gives you headaches. That also was a complaint I had about some of the newer Star Wars movies, is that they clearly compressed a lot of the dynamics to the point where like it was almost mono volume with the loud parts. There was no like crackle to the lightsabers because everything else around it was so loud already that the big stuff seemed to lose a lot of impact. I'm trying to remember Peter Gabriel's, I think it's Steve Lillywhite was Peter Gabriel's producer that came up with the gated drum effect. I could be wrong though. And Phil definitely did that gated drum a lot though. Are Hammer to Fall by Queen and Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin considered heavy metal? I don't know. There's debate as to whether Led Zeppelin is a metal band or like they're a rock band. At the beginning of, when we're looking at stuff from the 70s, there's no clear idea of what makes the genre heavy metal. They used to call everything heavy metal. Heavy metal was an attitude. They called like Hawkwind heavy metal, and I don't really think they're metal. Motorhead was called heavy metal, and Lemmy's like, nah, we're just a rock and roll band. So there's not a tight definition of metal, honestly, until you start getting into stuff in the 80s where things are like full bore metal. Where you're like hearing Metallica and you're like, this is heavy metal, right? You're hearing Judas Priest, this is heavy metal. So I don't know, like Immigrant Song sounds metal enough to me for me to say, yeah, it's a metal song. There's probably some other Led Zeppelin songs that I think feel like metal songs. Stone Cold Crazy by Queen. There's a lot of stuff, right? Yeah, I would consider Rainbow a metal band, but probably at the time, no one was thinking of them as they were a metal band or like early prog metal. Like, what is prog metal? Prog metal is like not really a thing until the 90s. Same thing with power metal, honestly. So we think of power metal as being like Manowar. Manowar's first album came out in 1980. Battle Hymns. Battle Hymns is what it's called. We didn't start calling it power metal till the 90s when we needed like a box to put around this melodic form of metal with like these high singers, but it's still full bore metal and not like kind of hair metal rock. It's not Skid Row. It's Manowar or Blind Guardian. Blind Guardian gets put in power metal even though they didn't really fit. They were like a speed metal band until the late 90s. And then they were power metal, but really they kind of transitioned into progressive metal. But they get lumped in there. Halloween, right? With Kai Hansen and Michael Kiske singing. High singers, really fast stuff, crazy guitar solos. At the time, they called Halloween probably speed metal. The idea of like, what is power metal? That wasn't a thing until we needed a definition for it in the 90s, because we started to have all these subgenres. We're like, okay, well, we got thrash metal, and then we ended up with death metal, and I guess this is power metal because it still has all that melodic singing. Then you have doom metal, and you start having all these different genres, hardcore metal, and I remember somebody, and this is a complaint about what we all do this. We genreize too much. We come up with too many different little divisions and definitions for what a genre is to put things in their nice little cubby holes. Like someone's like, oh, Pantera is groove metal. I'm like, nobody called anything groove metal in the 90s. When people are like, what Pantera was metal. Sometimes they called them hardcore metal. Sometimes they called them death metal. Oh, they don't sound like Cannibal Corpse. I was screaming and fast, so death metal. And Pantera was playing with death metal bands all the time. I saw Pantera with Morbid Angel and Slayer. Bro, Slayer death metal? No, they're thrash. Like you just we're trying to cut things up into tiny little squares, everything in its cubby, nothing mixing, nothing separate. I don't really jive with that. I think it's okay to have more blurry edges around our genres and our styles than what we tend to do. Yeah. So lots of things are metal. This is actually a problem with metal, and it's not just a problem with metal. I've talked about this before. I should probably make just a whole video on it. But anyway, we're getting close to the end here. When we genreize things too much, when a style or a genre starts to become too inwardly focused, too self-referential, it's basically set up to die. It becomes a niche product and just kind of withers away. So jazz is a great example. Metal is basically the new jazz, as weird as that sounds. So let's look at jazz. Look at jazz from the perspective of a person maybe who doesn't like jazz. Put on a modern jazz record and they will, your typical person will either get bored or annoyed with it and want to turn it off. There's nothing catchy about it. There's nothing they can sing along with. What they hear is kind of a wash of drum sounds, a bunch of fast notes, and maybe some, what will sound like a piano player playing randomly complex dissonant chords underneath it. It's like, modern jazz is very influenced by hard bop. It's harder to find even Herbie Hancock style stuff around anymore. That's maybe, or even like Weather Report, that's got a lot more variety to it. Unless you're going with something like Gordon Goodwin that is specifically almost anachronistic with his approach to jazz, which I like. There's so much variety with Gordon Goodwin's music because of who he is and the studio musicians he gets to play with. But your typical listener will want to turn it off. Jazz is harsh to outsiders, and it has been for a long time, starting like way back in the 70s with some of the more extreme fusion stuff like Bitches Brew by Miles Davis or On the Corner by Miles Davis. Your average person's not going to enjoy listening to that. But it started, there was avant-garde jazz before that. There was all kinds of stuff like that. When jazz stopped being the popular music, it started being about itself. And once it starts being about itself, there's a filter of like, outsiders will not like this, therefore we'll do the thing that outsiders don't like or understand. We'll play extreme improvisations, we'll do really extreme things. So jazz used to do really extreme things in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. There was a little bit of like a bop revival, big band revival in the 2000s. And, that's what you get. You get sort of revivals of previous styles. I don't know why my printer's going off. I don't know what it's doing. There's no one here. I'm the only one home. It's a ghost. You get little revivals of this and that. You get little kind of returns to extreme things, but it never becomes popular again. It's the same thing in metal. Metal has fallen in. There's like death metal. There's all these little genres and everybody's in them, and no one's really making new genres and no one's pushing the boundaries. No one's attracting any attention from outside the genre. Nothing's breaking out anymore and becoming a hit, despite what you would think about with like Polyphia or someone on YouTube that's only really interesting to nerds. The math rock kind of stuff. It's just guitar nerds and metal nerds. That's what the music is for now. It's not a popular form of music. Even though it's the most popular niche music, it's not really popular anymore, and nobody in the space is doing a whole lot to break out of that. There are a few bands that continue to try to develop and push things and do different things, mostly in the prog space, like Dream Theater or like Camelot or bands like that. And while they're doing their thing, it's not something that's like going to end up on the radio. It's something that's designed to push boundaries, but not to the effect that like people start listening to it. If that makes any sense. So when you're dead, but your boss still needs those Q1 charts in by 4. There's a bunch of stuff that gets lumped in with New Age as well, like Enya. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. One time they asked Enya what genre her music is in. And she said, Enya-esque. Yeah, I totally get that. Ease into Jazz with Herbie Hancock's Headhunters. That's a great album. One of my favorites. Herbie Hancock also did like hip hop stuff. People ask him like, why are you doing this hip hop stuff? He's like, well, my kids like it. I'm like, that's a great reason to do music, man. It's like, well, I want to do some music that my kids are excited to make with me and to play with. I saw that Mark Whitfield had like a family band. He has a band of like his family members. I'm like, how cool is that? And it's playing like his kind of stuff, like his kind of bop influenced jazz guitar stuff. It's really good. But an outsider would actually get bored probably through the solos because there's not a whole lot to grab onto. He's like so complex with his approach to soloing. You really have to start with something that's a little simpler, maybe more down to earth. I mean, I would say like people should listen to Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, you know. That's a great place to get into jazz. Huge amount of variety, tons of jazz stuff still in it. Amazing musicians, weirdness. You're not going to get bored with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. Gordon Goodwin's a great place to get into modern jazz. Gordon Goodwin and the Big Fat Band. I've seen them a couple times. And yeah, they have a great set of players. They have studio musicians like Eric Marienthal plays in the band, who's known for like smooth jazz stuff. It's very easy and memorable. All the stuff is very thoroughly composed, but there's also great solos in it too, like any good big band. So that's another good jazz artist to get into. Otherwise, you're going to go further back. Like if you're looking for a historic record, that's a great place to enter jazz. Birth of the Cool, Miles Davis' Birth of the Cool is an excellent record to step into. Don't start with Giant Steps. You're going to get overwhelmed. Don't start with Dizzy Gillespie stuff. It's going to sound like too much chaos. Start with Birth of the Cool. And then, or, you know, even Frank Sinatra, man. I have all of Frank Sinatra's records. I think I have all of them on vinyl. Crazy. I got them from a dead guy. Estate sales used to be a great place. You go into estate sales and like someone died and they have a giant record collection, just like pulling out the Sinatra and the Miles Davis. I pull out all the good stuff. Take it home. On the original pressings, you know, that's cool. Enya, I'm sorry, I'm not into black metal. I don't go in for that satanic stuff. Glad talk of Elon getting rid of the block button has fallen off. I think the block is so he was really saying like, we're going to just replace block with mute. So it'll just mute the person. And you can control who can reply to your tweet anyway. So there's other ways to control it. But I think block is important. Like people really need to be able to control what gets the inputs that they get subjected to when they're scrolling or when they're dealing with social media. Right? Being able to block a person that you don't want to talk to is actually really important for your mental health. You know, you don't want to feel like you are going to step into hostile territory when you step on the site. People don't want to feel that way. People want to go in and talk to friends. That's why social media is there, to talk to other people that are interesting. Though I do love the chaos of Twitter and the ability to step outside that and like really box with people. But it's good to be able to control that as well. That Disney movie Soul was only interesting to me because of the jazz stuff. I like jazz. I mean, I like jazz. I grew up playing jazz. I've played jazz my whole life. It's just, I have to be real that like who's into jazz now? If I go to a jazz concert, it's a bunch of like 50-year-old white dudes that think jazz is cool. It's because it's an outside genre. I don't see a lot of young people really getting into it. That's kind of sad because I think it has such a great history and you could do so much with it. If someone asks me like, what style is your music? I'm like, it's ambient, I guess. It's ambient rock. Because it's the closest thing. But it's, I did a 50-minute improv the other night, right? It's jazz, but it's way outside of what people would normally think of as jazz. Way outside of it. It's got the harmonies, but it's like this kind of slow. It's like jazz mixed with Steve Reich. And then the result is something that's bizarre. But I like to do that. I like to kind of work on the edge and do things that are really different and strange. Have you listened to Bloodgood? I don't think I have. No. What do you think of the music of Enya, Celtic Woman, Lisa Gerrard types? I find it boring. I don't really like it. I don't hate it, right? It's not like offensive to me, but I don't choose to listen to it. It's a little too boring for me. It's a little too... It always was. And it's not trippy enough for me to like listen to with interest, I guess. When I got to college, I opened my enormous CD case. He saw all the Sinatra CDs and said, "I guarantee you're the only person on campus with those." It was not a compliment. Oh, it's my roommate. Your roommate said that. Yeah. I have them on vinyl. I listen to Sinatra on CD. Let's do it on vinyl. It's okay. It probably sounds great on CD too, actually. Or just streaming over the internet. But anyway, yeah, that's a really good example. Like, there are people that are jazz heads who'd be like, Sinatra's not jazz. Like, okay. Yeah. These people hate smooth jazz. I don't know if you've ever talked to like jazz heads. They hate Kenny G with a passion. And I tell this anecdote about Kenny G that I wasn't there to witness. A friend of mine was. He went to a Kenny G concert because he had free tickets. He took a girl or something, right? Someone as a joke called out to Kenny G, "Why don't you play Giant Steps?" And so he turned around and clicked off the band and they played Giant Steps. And he like ripped the shit out of it, right? He played the crap out of Giant Steps. And then they went back to playing like the cheesy smooth jazz blues licks that, the stuff Kenny G is known for. And I bring that up because Kenny G plays this music that's very accessible and people like. It's very relaxing. They dig it, The Kenny G Christmas album. I think I remember him like playing saxophone in a naked baby on the cover, like in the 90s. Truth is, Kenny G can actually play his horn. Same thing with Eric Marienthal, right? Eric Marienthal plays lead alto for Gordon Goodwin and can shred. But because his focus is commercial music, he must be bad. Like, he must be bad at his instrument if his focus is commercial music. This was the attitude of like every jazz guy 20 years ago that I ever met. They hated Kenny G. And they hated Kenny G because people called him jazz. "I play real jazz. It's fast and people hate it. That's how you know it's real jazz. It's fast and a bunch of notes. I play the same pentatonic lick in 8 octaves as fast as I can, and I call that shredding." And that's the other thing I realized is like, man, this guy's playing fast. And I listen, I'm like, he's only playing 5 notes. He's playing G pentatonic for saxophone. So that'd be like, what is it? I don't know. E flat pentatonic. Right. He's playing B flat pentatonic scales. Play the lick. Press the octave key. Maybe do an altissimo note. Really fast. Never going to hit a wrong note, baby. Pentatonic scales. It's good. It's fine. I actually don't hate pentatonic scales. I use them sometimes. I never think in pentatonic, though. I always think in like, what are the notes of the chord and how much, how outside am I going to play with those? Do you like music in the vein of Greensleeves, Auld Lang Syne, Loch Lomond, etc.? I like folk music. I like real folk music, like Clancy Brothers. Liam Clancy's great. I like 16th Century Greensleeves by Ronnie James Dio. Yeah, I like that. It's fine. I don't listen to it much, though. Especially, I don't ever listen to or play Greensleeves because it's a Christmas song, and I don't like Christmas music. And I spent my the first 20 years of my professional existence playing Christmas music every year. I'm done with it. I don't want to ever hear Christmas music again. But I'm going to hear it every year no matter what. I love online shopping because I don't have to hear Christmas music. I hate going to stores in December. I hate it. It's one of the things that I really hate about the modern world. And this is why. It's a bunch of things. You go in, you're hearing bad pop renditions of Christmas music that I have played into the ground for these 40 long years. So that's annoying. This thing happens, and it happens a lot. The same thing happened in California, and it's the same thing here in Texas. It's like they flip a switch. Oh, the low got below 60. Turn on the heat. So you put on a coat because it's 40 outside. Put on a jacket. Get in your car. Drive to the grocery store. You get inside the grocery store. It's 79. You have to take your jacket off. You're wearing long pants. You're sweating. You're sweating through your shirt by the time you get your damn groceries out of the door. Right? Guys, you don't have to turn the heater on in a store full of people. They run that heater up to 80 degrees every store. So what you have to do is you have to take your jacket off in the car, shiver on your way into the store, and then shiver on your way back to your car because you'll be so sweaty from walking around the store. I don't know why they do it, but they crank that heat up around here. I hate it. Yeah, and then you have to listen to bad pop versions and then or the worst are original pop Christmas songs All I Want for Christmas Is You, Santa Baby, or Mannheim Steamroller. Oh, don't want to hear that stuff again. So yeah, that's the thing that I don't like about Christmas. And the other stuff is just more cultural complaints. We're too focused on presents. Right? We're too focused on, we're not focusing on the incarnation of our Lord, which is what it's supposed to be about. There's no sense of Advent. Advent is supposed to be a fast. You're supposed to be acting out the anticipation of the arrival of the Messiah, the incarnation of our Lord. Usually there's a fast for Advent. Most people don't participate in it, but it's not supposed to be as severe as Lent, but in most traditions there's a fast. Nobody does that anymore, even if you might maybe fish on Friday or something. But people don't think about I'm going to have a period of penitence as part of this tradition. So it all becomes why aren't you cheerful? Everyone should love Christmas. It's I didn't eat meat. I'm hungry. Whereas that joy should really come around the holiday, 12 days of Christmas, and not Advent, which should be looking forward to it and expecting thing, But our culture loses that as the idea of presents intrudes all the way into October, where I'm excited because I'm I think I got all my Christmas shopping done. I won't have to think about that for a couple of weeks. Greensleeves isn't really Christmas music. Well, they play it constantly at Christmas. Therefore, it's Christmas music. That's my thinking. I just hear it a lot around Christmas. That's all. I don't know why. You're right. You're absolutely correct, Hardwick. But I hear it a lot around Christmas. December? You mean October, right? Soon to be September, I'm sure. Yeah, you're right. Whenever writing music pentatonic, I always like my last resort. Whenever I can't find where to take a melody, I would use pentatonic for things where I'm going to be having many melodies lining up, and I've done this. So if I have fractal sketches kind of music, where it's here's a lick, a pentatonic lick, and here's another one on top, and here's another one, kind of fading into each other. I can, if you listen to Wooden Room, which is one of my songs. There's a bunch of pentatonic stuff because all the pentatonic stuff will generally sound okay with all the other pentatonic stuff when you're taking out the second and the seventh of the scale. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're taking out the third and the seventh. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. They all sound pretty harmonious with each other. It doesn't make you feel like you're stuck in one key. You're not hearing a lot of dissonance. So if you're hearing a lot of melodies, if I need to line up a bunch of melodies on top of each other and I don't want to worry about counterpoint or any of that crap, boom, pentatonic is the best choice. And it makes it so easy. You don't even have to think about it. You just think about like, oh, I'm surprised those things sound good together. Cool. Pentatonic all sounds good, and you just go with it. I listen to 18th century sea shanties. You've probably never heard of them. And it's all for me grog, me jolly, jolly grog. All for me beer and tobacco. Actually, I don't think that's a shanty. It's just what I remembered. For I spent all me tin with the lasses drinking gin. So far across the western ocean I must wander. Would you accept dying in 10 years if it meant you fulfilled your creative dreams to their fullest potential? I might if I didn't have to worry, didn't have to work during it. It's an interesting question. I don't like those kinds of deals. That sounds like a deal with the devil. I'll have, eventually I'll have eternity to work on all my creative potential as well. So I want to live this life in this full and good way as possible. That includes serving my family, my community, my children, not just my own creative impulses. And I don't know when I will die. I don't know. Maybe I'll die in 10 years. Maybe I'll die next year. I don't know when I'll die. I don't want to plan on dying next year. You know, that's weird, but I don't know when I'll be taken. I just have to do the best I can. And this is why I like to focus on processes rather than goals by themselves. Because you just continue doing the process and the things you want to start happening, right? You're writing, book. Book comes out. Books just start coming out. You just are finishing books. Wow, I'm achieving my dreams. Versus like, I'm going to write a book, and then you get to the end of it and you're like, I wrote the book. Now what do? I guess I get depressed because I accomplished my big goal. It's like, no, I just have a process. Just keep doing it. And if you die in that process, oh well. It's not like you ever stop doing it. So, you know what I mean? If I fulfilled my creative dreams by June, what would I do? Come up with new creative dreams. Keep going. I listen to video game music. At this point, I'll listen to the Dark Souls soundtrack 100 times before I listen to anything on modern radio. I like video game soundtrack music too. A lot more than movie soundtracks. I don't like to listen to movie soundtracks, actually. They're too aligned with the events in the movie, so they don't have they're not arranged formally in a way that I enjoy. It sounds like themes randomly assimilated outside the context of the movie. So I really don't like to listen to movie soundtracks very much. But I do like to listen to game soundtracks because those are completely different. Like the piece is a completely composed piece in most cases. 9 times out of 10, author motivation problems are really character motivation problems. That's a good point. Why does this character want to do this? Why does this character need to be here? Have I properly written that he ought to be doing this, right? Is he properly motivated to be here and doing this thing? That's a really good point. You know. Yeah, probably losing confidence. Like, my characters, they don't have a reason to be doing this. Anyway, I realized that it is 8:21. I started late because of my boomer tech issues. So I apologize for that. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And I'll play some music on the way out here, I guess. I'm not sure what. We'll play some music from the live stream from last week, maybe. And that'll be that. I will do another music stream at some point this week, and hopefully we'll be streaming on a bunch of different platforms for this show next week. I really appreciate everybody stopping by and giving me their input on even crazy stuff like music. You know, it's fun for me to think about all the different, I mean, there's so much that happens in music and even popular music. It's fun to think about a lot of that stuff. I'm not an expert on every little thing, but I do like to think about it a lot. A lot of main title themes work really well on their own. Yeah, so like Pop's performances of John Williams' Superman, Star Wars. Yeah, so Pop's performances, I can get that. But listening to the whole soundtrack, it's, you know, because you are writing it to visual cues, separating those two things out just doesn't leave me with a very satisfying musical experience. I kind of feel the same way about opera, to be honest, as well, even though opera is way more separable. enjoy watching an opera and seeing what the staging is supposed to be much more than just listening to an aria or something like that from an opera. It's just the way that I have to see it. I don't like separating out all the elements of movies. Like, I'm just going to just listen to the music. That's not how it was made. It was made to be one inclusive thing. So just taking the music out of it, it just doesn't yield a satisfying listening experience for me 9 times out of 10. Sometimes I do it, but usually I don't. Anyway, guys, have a great one, and I'll see you all next time.